site now with editions with editors all over the world.
Wow.
So our thing is like trying to kind of replicate that model, but with general automotive.
Okay, I got to read some stuff here. Want to thank everybody who's already tuned in live. We're going to be talking about all kinds of things going on in the auto industry right now. So if you got questions, shoot us an email. Send it to viewermail@autoline.tv. We will take phone calls too, and that number is 1-620-288-6546. You can get the podcast of this show tomorrow at the iTunes store. And of course, you can listen to all of our stuff on your smartphone by going through Stitcher. Just search for Autoline in either of those pieces. And of course, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel and just look for the Autoline Network. And we're going to get going here in just a moment.
You ready to go, John?
Yep.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, your journey, our passion, and by Lear, a global leader in automotive seating and electrical systems.
Well, welcome everybody to another episode of Autoline After Hours. My co-host, Gary Vassilash, is not here. He's abandoned me to go to Hawaii so he could drive the new Honda Odyssey minivan, the dog. But he'll be back here next week. In any case, joining us today are Seyth Miersma from Motor1.com, Chester Dawson from the Wall Street Journal, and Lindsay Brooke from SAE. And great to have all three of you guys here.
Thank you.
And we got a lot to talk about, so let's get going. I think, Seyth, why don't I throw it open to you, but everybody join in. We heard this week that GM is shutting down plant tours of the Corvette factory, and that has triggered a firestorm of speculation. So take it from there.
It's like one of my favorite Tom Waits songs. What are they building in there, right? What is he building in there? So of course everybody wants this to be the mid-engine Corvette, right? We want the.
Well, explain it a bit. We know that.
Sure, yeah. So there's an 18. They're going to close off the end of the existing tours. I think around July, mid-July.
Something like that.
And then after
for
that,
18 months.
After that, there's 18 months of no tours. So yeah, speculation is sort of rampant. The official GM line is that the paint shop is being moved from, I guess, one side of the factory to the other, and that they're going to try and create a better tour experience. So you know, of course, that has everybody on the internet buzzing about what it really is. Is this a new getting the engine production ready for the new V8? Is this the mid-engine Corvette? Is really, again, what everybody kind of wants it to be, or is it none of the above or something else? I don't really know. You know, I have a feeling that it's more than a paint shop. Let's put it that way. But
yeah, I would pick B. I would pick that they are tooling the plant for the new Corvette. You know, the hard.
What do you mean new Corvette?
Well, the C8 Corvette, a mid-engine, you know, complete.
Oh, you mean mid-engines?
Yeah, mid-engine, new architecture. You know, the hard points in the chassis where the engine would fit in would not require that much time. I mean, that's, you know, the engine's done somewhere else, and that's just going to fit in there. So I would go with B on that.
I'd say the same thing. You know, we're probably close in another year or so for a major refresh of the Vet. Hasn't it been out 4 years now?
Yeah, yeah.
So, you know, you'd think it's about time for a refresh, but you don't tear up a plant for 18 months to do a refresh. You change the front and rear fascia and call it a day.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Absolutely, and I think too there's an element of, you know, this press release came out. I think it was actually the Corvette Museum in Bowling Green that at least where they staged it and put out the press release too. So it's coming out that this is all coming to light in a really interesting way too. That makes you wonder, like, is this kind of a provocative way of teasing out what's really happening? This has been the biggest story. I mean, I've been writing car news online for 10 years now, and the mid-engine Corvette story was the biggest story then too. It is now. So you can't just come out and say it. I think there's got to be a little romance happening for sure.
Well, look, if you're going to cut off plant tours, you got to let people know we're not going to have plant tours. So I wouldn't read too much into that.
I'm going to take the long odds and say it's going to be the new levitating all-electric Corvette to debut in 2020.
You know, the size of an Escalade, too. The Corvette Escalade, right. So Speaking of sports cars, Seth, you just got a chance to drive the McLaren 720S.
I did, yeah.
What do you think?
Was out in Italy, so I got a really, really good look at the car, both on some great roads and on a racetrack too. And it's a phenomenal piece of work. I think McLaren. I've been really excited about the McLarens that I've been in because they're, although the technology is kind of incredible, the powertrain is amazing for this car. We're talking about 710 horsepower from 4-liter V8, which is just blows my mind. It feels, to a certain extent, it feels light and plugged in like older cars do, or did to me, more than, even something like an R8, which is a phenomenally fast car, tends to be a little bit detached. And so I think McLaren is really like playing to that kind of super enthusiast taste, and it's a lot of fun.
You're a tall guy. You fit in it?
Yeah, absolutely. So they've done a really good job with the what do they call them? Dihedral doors. They lift up.
Scalloped.
Oh, so they've cut out the top. Yeah, so that there's and the carbon fiber tub, which is a new generation of tub for McLaren. I think it's called Mono Cage 2, is lower. So in those, some of these old supercars, the carbon fiber tubs would be really high. You've got to step over and then kind of drop.
The sills
in.
are always high.
Exactly. Yeah. So the sills are a lot lower on this. Plus, there's the big cutout for the door. So I'm 6'5". I can still drop into the car pretty easily and have enough room. I'm eating my knees a little bit, but it's a McLaren.
Now, were they talking hybridization? They've been kind of
Absolutely
walking down that line a little bit.
Yeah, I think so. This car falls into their sort of mid-tier, which is they call the Super Series, and I think that there are going to be a few more products that are using this powertrain, the 4-liter twin turbocharged 4-liter. But I think everything above that, the Ultimate Series, which was the P1, that's done now, is going to have some level of electrification with it, and then down the road, that's gonna find its way, I think, into all of the range for McLaren. They have an F1 lineage, and that's where F1 is.
Don't you think all supercars are going to go that way?
I think they have to, yeah.
Because you get so much better acceleration with electric.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the torque pop that you get, and the way that they're reducing the size of motors, they're reducing the size of batteries, they're increasing the overall output, and generally, making a performance hybrid something that's really desirable and not just necessary anymore, which I think is fantastic. So. Yeah, it's an exciting time in the world of $300,000.
Is that what's the cost?
Yeah, I mean the MSRP theoretically in the U.S. is $284 and some change, but I don't think you'll sell that car under $300,000. I mean, you get 3 carbon fiber packages and it adds $20,000 to the bottom line. So
should Ferrari be worried about McLaren at all?
I mean, do you think Ferrari ever worries about anybody else?
Good answer.
No, I mean, a Ferrari is its own thing. If people want a Ferrari, they have to get on a waiting list, and I think McLaren wants to be there. I think with this car, it's already the first year of it is sold out, or the production is nearly sold out. So they're getting to that point of having a high level of desire for the brand. But you got to remember, too, McLaren Automotive is, 7 years old now or something? So the fact that they're where they're at, I think, starting in 2010 or 2011, to me is pretty remarkable. So,
and what's a year's production for them?
What is it? I think it's under 4,000 last year, and
that many?
Yeah,
wow.
they want.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
They want a hard cap at 5,000 too. I mean, I've been to a couple of their launches and presentations, and they've drummed home this message that there will be more capacity then they'll want to make cars to a certain or at a certain point. So I think 5,000 is really where they're at right now in terms of the ceiling to maintain that desirability. If you want to compete with Porsche, Ferrari, Lamborghini, those guys.
Yeah, but Ferrari, which has sort of artificially capped itself as, I want to say 7,000 cars a year, is bumping that up to 9,000, which is a big percentage gain. But when you look at what's opening up in the world, especially like China, and India is going to be next on the list, and other places, I think the global market can easily absorb that increase.
Yeah, the global universe of billionaires continues to rise.
Yeah, I mean, you'd think that if they can sell more cars, they would want to make more cars. I don't know if they're kind of drawing that line in the sand right now, so they really are able to generate that long-term demand for the brand, or how serious they are about it maybe 10 years down the road. But that's a number that I've heard repeated from them a few times. So
interesting. Well, some of the other news that broke this week is we got sales for April in the American market. Chester, anything that stood out in the sales numbers to you?
Well, for the Chicken Littles, it was, Deliverance, here again, another month of lower sales. Personally, I'm not sure. You could see the glass half empty or half full. I mean, clearly the market is plateauing at best and probably going to come down a peg or two, as has been widely forecast. So this is, not unusual in that respect. And, for the glass half full folks, I mean, if we're down 1%, that's still not 13 million. It's 17 million, or maybe, in the worst case scenario, 60 million, some and change. I guess the question going forward for the industry is this just a, sustainable, or are we, at a peak and we're going to see, the industry start to fall apart? I don't think there's a lot of evidence of the latter, to be honest, quite yet. People point to the fact that used car values are down and that cars are more expensive. The affordability question is coming into play. That's true, although, for the broader economy, incomes are up, housing values are up. So by some of the traditional, macro indicators, there are not a ton of signs showing clouds on the horizon. On the other hand, I don't think we're going to be at 18 million anytime soon.
Yeah. No, to me, I agree with you. Most everybody was reporting that sales were down about 5%, but there was one less selling day April this year than a year ago. Easter fell in April this year. It was in March last year.
There's 2 days out of the cycle.
Well, one selling day, but a weekend where a whole lot of people don't go car shopping. Mm-hmm. They're taking time off, they're doing family stuff, whatever. So I don't think the market is that weak. If you look at the first 4 months total, I think it's off 2.5% or something like that, which is down, but it's not the end of the world. And, I wouldn't be surprised to see sales climb back up again later in the year because of what you're talking about. Unemployment continues to fall. More people are coming back into the workforce. Wages are going up. Gasoline prices are cheap. Credit's still relatively well available. I mean, this is all a good mix for car sales.
Oh, what a feeling.
On the other hand, it feels like a really good time to get a great deal on a sedan, doesn't it? Because everybody is the segments that are up are all SUV, crossover, especially the smaller ones right now. So an incentive spend, I guess, is up a little bit too overall. So it feels like if you're in the market for an Accord sedan, maybe I don't know specifically about Honda, but now might be the time.
Yeah, no, not so much Honda.
Right.
They're so retail focused.
Yeah.
Right.
You want to go after the guys who are dumping cars into the rental fleets because there's where you're going to get a killer deal.
And it's interesting, too, because if you take, say, Fiat Chrysler, where they're kind of getting out of sedans, and that's, at one level, a big risk. I mean, if gas goes back to $5 a gallon, this may be the worst business decision ever taken. But as long as Jeeps and Ram trucks are rolling out, even Ram even passing the Silverado from GM, they're going to make hay while the sun is shining.
Yeah. I was just reading somebody that was commenting on, with this slowdown in the market, maybe they're going to have to cut back in production. Maybe somebody's going to have to close a plant. They were speculating a lot of stuff. But that was their point. It's going to be all passenger car plants that close or throttle back. Yeah. None of the truck or SUV plants are going to throttle back. And FCA is down to what? On the Chrysler side, the Chrysler Old Corp side of thing, they're down to one passenger car plant, the Bramley plant in Canada. And those sales are actually doing not half bad.
But it's funny, those cars, and I'm driving a 392 Challenger right now. It just seems like it's been around forever.
You know why? Because it has.
I know that. I mean, walking through the FCA display at the auto show was like walking through a car museum, But they continue to iterate with paint jobs and with engine packages, more horsepower, wheels and stuff. They continue to just make hay with this thing.
Look at all the hay they made with the Demon. I mean, they milked that intro for all it's worth. Yeah. And I don't have the numbers in front of me. I believe Challenger sales were up last month. Mm-hmm. And I think that's how Demon pays for itself. They're going to sell a few handfuls of these things. But it's generated so much buzz about Dodge, people are going, oh, Dodge, I got to go to the Dodge store.
Speaking of Demon, what do you guys think of the controversy of, is it a dangerous car?
Oh, I think that's ridiculous.
Automotive News had an editorial on that, and I think it was based around semi-slick tires that are being sold with this car, which to me is just a simple upsell from the dealer level.
What's faster, a McLaren 720S or a Demon?
The commenters on Motor One tell me that the Demon is faster.
Okay.
And they want to make sure that I know that. But I don't know about dangerous. Listen, if you put 800 plus horsepower into any car, isn't it slightly more dangerous than a Camry, right? I mean, it's dangerous, but I don't know that it's really like crossing a threshold when you've got, a wealth of engineers putting this package together and telling you that it's good and what it's good for, right? That package is for the drag.
Here we got the clip of the thing lighting up at the intro.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, look, a Tesla Model S in ludicrous mode is probably just as quick.
Maybe quicker to 0 to 60.
So is Automotive News calling for a ban on that? Of course not.
Right.
Look,
Well, the other thing is this all plays to their marketing. They want to be the bad boys with this, so they weren't making any bones about the fact that it couldn't get approval for, whatever from this organization and making it street legal. I just feel like, they're kind of watching this and probably laughing because they're getting a lot of extra publicity out of it.
Right.
And it's going to the very, not everybody's going to want a Demon, right? That's a pretty niche audience. And to the extent that it draws attention to the brand, so much the better. And as you were saying earlier, I mean, a lot of their vehicles, I was just looking at numbers for the Caravan. And in April, that was the first month this year that sales of the brand new Pacifica beat the Caravan. The Caravan debuted in 2007. It's a 10-year-old vehicle.
Yeah.
So it's pretty amazing how much they're getting out of their older vehicles. But I guess it shows that they're not able to invest as much. They don't have the cash other companies do. So they're trying to make the best with what they've got.
plus, I think Automotive News was just looking for controversy.
Sure.
Generate as much as they could. What I found even more interesting is Keith Crane, who owns the whole Crane Communications thing, wrote an editorial in Auto Week, sister publication, saying Automotive News is wrong.
Yeah, right.
I thought Keith wrote the first article in the, the first editorial.
Right.
But, to me, it's, look, if you're going to pick on the Demon because it's designed to be a race car, I don't know how you can't say ban everything that's just as fast.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Yeah, the P100D Tesla is like a 2.2 second to 60 car.
That's pretty quick.
Pretty quick.
So, yeah, I think Automotive News got what it wanted, or whoever on Automotive News' staff wrote that editorial got what they wanted.
Yeah.
They got a lot of people talking about them.
Sure.
The Demon traffic is the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah.
So it made the New York show, and it's sort of hasn't really flatlined after that. So.
Hey, look, we got a lot more to talk to, but we also got to take a quick break right now because we got to make sure that we give a good recognition to the people who make these shows kind of possible. The ones who sponsor it, we're going to give a shout out to our friends at Lear.
Lear Connexus offers a parental controls application with geofencing that sends notifications regarding driving behavior and location, including curfew alerts, acceleration alerts, and speed alerts. All delivered to a smartphone application that includes vehicle location, driver notifications, and a report card of driving history, including notifications when predefined geographic boundaries are crossed. For more information, visit Lear.com.
Okay. We're back. We're talking about all kinds of things going on in the automotive industry right now, and let me call up what we have here. Lindsay, you just flew in this morning from the coast because you were out in California. Intel was doing some big yoo-ha-ha about how automotive they're becoming.
And an autonomous driving workshop, which I feel as a reporter usually to be pretty valuable because, it's a chance to go around and talk to subject experts in all sorts of areas. The guy who's in charge of over-the-air, connectivity, 5G, DSRC, just talking about the enormous amount of data that's going to be flowing into vehicles, already flowing into vehicles, but once we go to more autonomy in the vehicle, 45 terabytes per hour. Now, I have no baseline for what a terabyte is, but it's a lot of data.
Yeah.
And there's going to be more and more. Now, everything that comes into the vehicle, there's a lot of ephemeral data that really isn't data that can be used or retransmitted somewhere. It's just data to dynamically keep things going. But I think the point that Intel was trying to make is processing speed for these chips has to go up. Capability of the chips has got to go up. The car's going to be talking to other cars, talking to the cloud. It's a really interesting time to be looking at this autonomous connected period.
And you're the one who made the point. It's like, here's this classic Silicon Valley company that wants to become an automotive supplier.
Right. Well, they were there with Delphi, and Delphi is a partner of theirs. And they were there, BMW was there as well. So it's this kind of like a triumvirate partnership. And Delphi is trying to become a tech company. There's no question. For valuations, and they just recently spun off their Powertrain business a couple days ago. They're going to be doing that. That'll be completed by, I think, March 18. So they'd like to be considered to be a tech company. Intel, on the other hand, was almost, seems like they want to be an automotive tier one or an automotive supplier. So really interesting stuff going on. And obviously their big competitors are the NVIDIAs of the year, and of the world, and the Qualcomms of the world, and the Infineons of the world. So there's this chip war that's going on right now, again, to process data that's going into the vehicle and out of the vehicle.
What's your take on all this move in the Valley? Are they going to be significant players, or are they just going to become another in the line of automotive suppliers?
Well, I think for a while there'll be some value. The funny thing about this is, unlike saying, I've got Brembo brakes on the car and I can charge $8,000 for a premium brake package, or Recaro seats, it's really tough to communicate to the end customer the difference between one, say, ADAS suite or chipset versus another. The chip makers are trying to discern that between their tier one customers and the auto industry, but at the end of the day, it's all very invisible. The strange thing about Intel is they made so much hay putting Intel inside into laptops and onto PCs. Almost a revolution in that regard, marketing their capability from a decal on the side of a laptop. They wish they could do that with cars. They're not going to, the OEMs aren't going to let them do that. So really, how do you discern, as this chip battle continues, what's better than another? What's more premium than another? I don't know.
Well, I'll come down to, does the person buying the car care?
Doesn't care at all.
They don't care.
Doesn't care at all. So, point you made earlier, I mean, the auto industry has built its reputation on commoditizing everything. It was only a few years ago we looked at cameras on vehicles, and you'd think, how could they get the cost of a backup camera down? Well, now these things are just like popcorn. I mean, they're totally commoditized. Radar, the experts in Intel say, and Delphi, that's heading towards the commodity realm. It's not there yet. It's going to take a while, but radar will be somewhat commoditized. LiDAR, going to take a while. I mean, LiDAR still is not even affordable in the vehicle. But all of these things are going to be, it's the automotive process, is you make more of them, you continue to re-engineer and iterate them till the cost comes down.
I thought LiDAR had come down to where it is affordable. I thought the latest LiDAR units were about $250, but you need 4 of them.
You need 4 of them per car, so there's $1,000. And the solid state, I think, is going to take a lot of cost out, plus make them more reliable.
Yeah.
But yeah, $1,000 for one.
But that's today. In 5 years, they're not going to be 250.
Well, and that's what I'm saying, because 5 years ago, we looked at cameras and said, God, how long is it going to take? Right. So,
what do you guys make, too, of Delphi now splitting the company? They're going to spin off their powertrain operations, or, their powertrain components. And what do you guys make of that?
It does feel strange. I mean, I'm certainly not plugged into that realm, but it feels really strange to me to be having a conversation about, first of all, Delphi splitting off powertrain at all, but second of all, them being kind of a hot brand in Silicon Valley, or at least a known thing in Silicon Valley. It feels like they're always kind of a legacy company to me. Although from some people that I've talked to, it does seem like they've been making smart investments over the last 5 years, that they've been kind of ahead of the curve where it comes to quote unquote mobility, and really like getting in that side of the business is to be essentially the main business for them right now. So, or the bigger half, anyways. So it's an interesting move from a name that I've been hearing my entire life. So.
Well, not only that, but to your point, the powertrain is clearly the littler brother in this transaction. It's all about the bright, shiny object, and clearly this was driven by Wall Street. You know, investors didn't want to invest in the commoditized parts part of the business. They wanted to only invest and have the company focus its investment on, you know, the next generation vehicles. And so it's a bit of a leap of faith. I mean, they are earning money on this. But I was at a Delphi presentation a couple weeks ago about some of these acquisitions that they made, and I thought the interesting part of that was not just all this stuff that's going to come, you know, in 2020 and beyond, but there's a lot of vehicles on the road today that they think they can kind of retrofit to start getting some of that data out of and repackaging it and selling it. And I guess, you know, one question that remains to be answered is, you know, even if, say, LiDAR can get down to $10 a pop or whatever on these things, and you can have it on all four corners of the car, I guess there's a value proposition too. I mean, if once these things are commoditized, I guess the hope is that you can get the cost down so that there's still money to be made. But I wonder too, I mean, how many car buyers are going to demand this? And there is a bit of a push down, you know, in terms of, you know, regulatory safety issues and that type of thing. But I wonder too about how many people are going to want to pay an extra $2,000 or $5,000 for like this ultimate package. You know, obviously we're talking about less than a completely autonomous vehicle, but I think there's a lot of wishful thinking that people are going to want this. We need to make it for them. And I'm not so sure some of the surveys that have been done about that show that the consumer is quite there yet. So it's kind of interesting, this game of how far you go down that path of technology and whether the consumer is going to be there at the end of it.
Well, there's even discussion on, you know, the X amount of years into level 4 and level 5 autonomous vehicles, you know, are they going to be purchasable by us? Will they be basically fleet vehicles? Will they be very tightly controlled by the manufacturers? I think there's a pretty good argument to be made for that.
Oh yeah, no, I think that's how it's going to start out.
Yeah.
You know, when companies like Ford and BMW are saying we're going to have level 4 and 5 cars available in 2020, 2021.
That ain't gonna
they're
be in the
talking
showroom.
fleets.
Right.
Yeah, they're talking highly controlled.
Right.
I think, you know, you're talking 2025 and beyond.
Yeah.
Before any of us can walk into a showroom and say, I want that autonomous car.
Yeah.
The other thing I think it's worth keeping in mind is the Trojan horse element of all this technology. And, you know, I don't want to be Debbie Downer, but I think there is a considerable cybersecurity risk. You know, it's one thing if your iPhone is hacked, it's another if your vehicle is when you're on the highway. So I think the industry, the traditional industry is just starting to come to grips with that. And I think Silicon Valley too is saying, don't worry about that, we got that. But I think we've seen a few cases here and there where they haven't got that. And there's these, you know, potential for misuse or worse. So at a minimum, it's going to be an extra cost for the industry to keep in mind to make sure that they're bulletproofing their technology and their vehicles. And potentially it could be a nightmare if, you know, you start to get the regulators involved and this starts to slow down some of this technology actually getting to market.
It could.
My first thought when I hear you talking about terabytes of data flowing through vehicles, right? Like the fact that it's not locked down all the time is, you know, suspicious.
Yeah.
Well, the good news is it's so much data, the Russians won't be able to keep up with that.
Yeah. That's right.
But, you know, going back to Delphi, I think they're #1 in the world as a major tier 1 supplier. I think they thought through this mobility thing far better than any other supplier.
And as Chester said, the acquisitions have been smart.
Oh, super smart. And because they're getting into data and they know that the data will be monetized. I know of no other tier 1 automotive supplier that's thought it as thoroughly through as Delphi has. The other thing is, you know, they're talking about changing their name. You know, right now they're talking about the powertrain operations that they're going to spin off. They call that SpinCo, and the rest of the stuff that they're going to keep as RemainCo. Mm-hmm. And I believe, this is my speculation, that they're going to let the powertrain operations take the Delphi name. Because Delphi, even though it's done a lot of great stuff in technology and the like, it's still viewed on Wall Street as an automotive name. And I think the RemainCo will come up with some, you know, Silicon Valley-like kind of name, high-tech.
Silco.
Something.
Right.
And so, yeah, I'm expecting to see Delphi change its name. Or like I said, keep the name, but with the old powertrain operations.
We were joking in the office that they could pull some of their old brand names out of mothballs, and that like AC spark plug would be hilarious.
Right.
Just for the T-shirts alone would be worth it, right?
Totally worth it.
Another thing on that, there is a possibility that Delphi might disappear both in name and in whole, because by spinning off the powertrain, not only do you make that a potential takeover target for somebody who wants to aggregate these commodity parts suppliers, but also, one of the issues with Delphi is that it's got a fairly rich market cap, and they've been doing the right things, as you mentioned, and they're about 22 billion, which would be pretty tough for anybody to take over at that size. But now, this RemainCo, as you say, is going to be closer to 17 billion. Now, that would still require a premium to be paid over that, but let's not forget that Intel paid about 15 billion and change for Mobileye. So suddenly, if a savvy, say, Silicon Valley-based company really wanted to get in the tier 1 space, well, that's more of a possibility than it was a couple of weeks ago.
A great point. Yeah, and I think that's what I should say. What's interesting to me about Powertrain is they had an analyst call, they had a media call. I sat in on the media call and got to ask their CEO, I think his name's Kevin Clark, is that right? Why didn't you sell it? And he essentially said, oh, we can't comment on that. If I'm reading the tea leaves, it sounds to me like they did try to sell it. Nobody was buying, and now they're spinning it off as its own separate company. And I think the reason that they want to get rid of it is why continue to invest CapEx? Why put capital expenditures into these traditional powertrain kinds of, even though they're bleeding edge, but it's still internal combustion engine kind of stuff. Why not take all that money and invest it in the sexy stuff that Wall Street really likes? And that's what I'm reading this as. Is I hadn't thought about that as setting yourself up to be bought out. That's pretty good. But I think the immediate step is, let's get rid of powertrain. Now we don't have to invest in it. We can take all that money and put it elsewhere.
And that's kind of a trend. I mean, Continental last week, I think it was, made rumblings about this. They reorganized, trying to separate the electronic, connected, autonomous part of Conti from their traditional business. Both of them have 48-volt systems, which are state-of-the-art, but it is kind of hybridization versus electrification and autonomy. So it's more of a short-term, kind of mid-term play with that. Delphi's got some lean burn combustion technology. It's very advanced. Again, short-term to mid-term. So I think some IP goes along with this Delphi spin-off as well. I think Bosch is doing the same thing. I mean, getting rid of some powertrain component sets.
Starters and alternators.
Starters and
they
alternators.
Just sold that off to a Chinese group.
And I can see, I asked Greg DeVos about this, or Glenn DeVos about this. At Delphi.
CTO,
right.
Right.
CTO. And that's as far as he would go, is, he's just kind of keeping it the way it is right now. We're not going to really talk about what we intend to do with this. But you could see a major, just like, Chinese glass companies, Chinese, gray metal companies are coming to this market. I could see a big acquisitor for Delphi Powertrain.
And I interviewed Kevin Clark yesterday after the deal came out, and he really went out of his way to say that although they're spinning this powertrain unit off, if the right buyer came along, they'd still be willing to sell. And as Lindsay said, they've still got a year before this thing closes, so we may yet see another page turn.
Mm-hmm. I think the internal combustion engine is going to be around a lot longer than most people think. There's some report that just came out this week that said by 2030, which is right around the corner, really. In automotive terms, that's just a couple of design cycles.
2.5
right?
design cycles.
So they're saying by 2030 in the United States, 95% of all vehicle miles traveled is going to be in electrified shared vehicles. And I think that's, I think it's totally bogus.
Yeah.
I think, and look, I'm all in favor of this happening. I just don't believe it's going to happen that quickly, because it takes, right now in the United States, 22 years to turn the fleet over. So the 2017 cars rolling off the line right now will not be completely off the road until 2039.
Right.
And, and then you take it out, okay, by 2020, that means it's going to be not until 2042 that the 2020 vehicles are completely off. So, things turn over much more slowly than I think the tech people seem to be aware of. And that's why I think the internal combustion engine, which is a moving target, keeps getting better all the time, cleaner, more affordable, it's going to be around a lot longer, and especially if you get into any kind of decarbonized gasoline with biofuel or whatever. Now you're going to have a pretty strong argument that it's got a fairly small carbon footprint to it.
I agree, and it's still a money spinner in terms of the extra cost of batteries, which are coming down, but not as fast as everybody thinks they are. The difference between GM and the incumbents versus the startups is they still make their money selling internal combustion engine vehicles, at a profit versus using someone's money to fund the next R&D program. So, yeah, it's interesting.
Bill, the other thing is that environmentally speaking, I mean, if that's the big sell for electric vehicles, I don't really think it can be, because not everybody's going to want just to wear green lapels. But even if that is the case, there's a significant body of knowledge that shows on a wheel-to-well basis that if everybody's driving an electric car, that electricity's got to come from somewhere. And there's a lot of countries around the world, there's a lot of parts of this country which are largely dependent on coal-fired generation. So, I mean, yes, if all of the coal-fired plants become, powered by natural gas, that's one step. But they're not all going to be powered by windmills either. So I think there's a little bit of legerdemain here in terms of, just how green is that vehicle, particularly when you get to a point where it's no longer a niche, but, a significant number of the car driving public is driving electric vehicles. Where that electricity comes from, I think, is going to increasingly come into play.
I would add to that, we have to start looking at how energy intense it is to manufacture batteries. Most people don't know this. I've been to the battery factory. You got to bake these things in ovens at very high temperatures for 6 weeks. I was at the Nissan battery plant a while back, and they use what they call the prismatic batteries. They look like TV dinners. They're these little
pouch,
a little pouch kind of a thing. You put it in the oven for 3 weeks, baking it constantly, 24 hours a day at high temperature. 3 weeks, you pull it out, you slit it open to degas it, you tape it back up and put it back in the oven for another 3 weeks. And the Union of Concerned Scientists has estimated that an electric car with a 240-mile range starts out life, rolls off the assembly line with a carbon footprint that's 68% larger than a piston engine car. So we've got to look at the energy that goes into making these things, and then at the other end, we have no way of recycling these lithium-ion batteries. Technically, we know how to do it. Nobody knows how to do it in high volume and make a profit at it. There is one company in the United States that says it can do it, but they're not doing it because, number one, the batteries just haven't come back
No
in enough volume yet, right? So, but at some point, we're going to have zillions of these batteries, and if all we go is put it in the landfill, how green is that?
I don't know that the needle really gets moved meaningfully because of a sense of concern for the environment either. I mean, I think people ultimately are making these decisions on really rational, sort of boring basis, right? Like they want to, can they afford it? Does it make sense for their lifestyle? Is it cheaper to run on a day-to-day basis? Yeah. And as you say, like until we get the cost of manufacture, the cost of the batteries down.
And the recycling.
And the recycle, like, yeah, so many elements have to come together. I think people want it because it seems like the future and it seems inherently better on an end user basis right now. But I don't know, getting to the point where you're talking about 95% of road miles, it does feel like it's a little bit further down the road, as it were.
Another thing, last week I had a Chevy Bolt EV, which I love. I really like the car. Yeah. And so Chevy called me and said, hey, there's all kinds of level 3 chargers around you. And I'm like, you're kidding. And they showed me how to get online or on the screen on the car, and you can search out these level 3 chargers. Well, there's one that's just a few miles away from the office here. So I thought, I'm going to go give this thing, a big jolt of juice. And so I pulled up, and it's next to a party store. It's only one charger. So thank God nobody was there in front of me, because otherwise I'd have, and it goes for 30 minutes at a time. You plug in, and it'll charge for 30 minutes. So thank God I didn't have to wait 30 minutes for somebody else to get in there. I plug it in. It's $6 just to plug in. before you even start charging the thing.
It's like an air pump, you know, filling up your tires, $1.50, you know? It's like, you know, it's the same.
So I paid, it's at $5.95. I recharged for 30 minutes. I got about 60 minutes range, or 60 miles of range. That was another $6. So I paid $12 to go 60 miles. And one of the big arguments in favor of electric cars is it's a lot cheaper to operate than filling up with gasoline. Well, that's true if you're charging at home. But if you start using these level 3 chargers, man, it's no cheaper.
And the market will definitely take off with that. I mean, if you've got a restaurant or a convenience store or whatever, there's going to be some money to be made from that.
I will say that we just had Cadillac in the office the other day, and they were showing off their CT6 plug-in hybrid, which is cool. But we were talking about the chargers at home too. The cost of the home units that you put in your garage have come down a lot in the last couple of years. So I think now with a Bolt, you can wrap it into your lease, and I want to say it's under $500 or that range.
And a few years ago it was about $2,000.
Right, exactly.
Now that was to get the unit and hire an electrician to wire it in your house.
Yeah, sure. From the Chevy program? I don't know. I don't know if it included installation or not.
No, I don't think it does. I think it's just the unit itself, but still, it's a whole lot cheaper than it used to be.
Well, you're a handy guy. You can.
And not to get too wonky, but again, if you start having more and more of these electricity demands on the grid, and you want to, say, move from coal to gas, I mean, someone's going to have to pay that cost. And in some jurisdictions, like, say, Ontario, where they're trying to force that through by going much greener and kind of really promoting the use of electric vehicles, what's happening is you're seeing the power bills start to go up. So, yeah, you can charge at home, but if you're paying twice as much for electricity because the demands are such, again, demand and supply, and somebody's got to make those large upstream investments. The other thing is, I think with oil prices too, everybody fears, $5 a gallon at the pump. And I'm not saying that can never happen, but you are seeing an incredible technology renaissance in things like shale oil, which have really kept the price low and confounded a lot of experts. And hey, whatever happened to the peak oil debate, right? I mean, 10 years ago, that's all anybody could ever talk about. Now nobody's talking about that. So I think the idea too that, I mean, part of it, your question whether someone's going to buy a car just because it's environmentally friendly to do so. I mean, there are people like that, but the other pressure, the economics pressure, I'm not so sure that oil is necessarily going to be in such short supply that it forces people to do that. I think people still want to pay less, and the internal combustion engine will get more efficient, and that's just a dynamic of greater competition in the marketplace. But again, the ideal, there's some finite supply of oil, and we're all racing toward that day when there's going to be no more oil. I think that has kind of been shown not necessarily to be the case, maybe in 100 years, but not in our lifetime.
No, I totally agree with you. In 2 points I would add to that. Number one, with all this fracking that's going on, that's really changed the game. It's largely only the United States so far that has gotten into fracking in a big way. And there are other places in the world that could do a whole lot more of it, i.e., to add to your argument, we could have even more of this, especially natural gas available. And secondly, the United States is now using less gasoline than it did 10 years ago, even though there are many millions more cars on the road. So these fuel efficiency laws are having an impact. We're using less gas with more cars on the road, and I think fracking's going to spread to other places of the world. You never want to say never. I don't ever see oil prices going up unless there's a war or some other major conflagration.
Sure.
Hey, we're getting all kinds of questions coming in here from the audience. Let's go through some of this. Our work says, I see a lot of 200s around here. I guess he's talking Chrysler 200s. Is there a giveaway going on? Well, yeah, there is, right? I mean, have they stopped production of the plant?
I thought they did.
I think they did.
The 200 is officially out of production.
Because they're putting the Ram pickup in there.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
And
200 still in the pool, so to speak?
Well, they got inventory to work off, and I'm sure dealers are happy to get.
Are dealing.
We were joking earlier. If you want a great deal, go buy a passenger car. I'll bet you get a killer deal on a Chrysler 200.
I agree.
I think inventories of 2016 models are considerably higher now than they were year over year too. So there might be, 200s amongst that group for sure.
He also says the Vin Diesel ad is funny. Another spoof of that terrific Lincoln ad. I haven't seen the Vin
Haven't seen it
Diesel
either.
ad.
No.
I missed it.
Okay, once again, the audience is ahead of the panel. Okay, Chuck Grenchy wants to know, what's the take on the panel of Tesla saying that their new vehicle, the Model 3, is still on time?
Don't believe it. It's mine. He hasn't hit deadlines. They did get the Falcon 9 up the other day without any incident, which is still a big deal.
Landed.
Amazing.
Did you see the landing?
Landed it, right.
On land.
Right.
It looked like a science fiction movie. That
Yeah.
thing landed. I thought it was cool.
I think if he makes Model 3, if he makes his deadline, it's going to be a small batch of white-gloved, very finessed cars off the line to be able to tell the investment community that we made this deadline. It's going to be very low on the production curve. But I wouldn't bet on it.
See, I think he will start building cars in July. That's what he's promised everybody.
Oh, I do too.
But I think you're right, Lindsay.
Yeah.
It's going to be, one a day kind of a thing
Yeah.
to start with. And one of the reasons I say that, and I know this for a fact, is that production equipment suppliers were told, get your equipment in. And when they're told, but, we still have to do our cycle testing and all, it was like, don't do any of that. Just go through the checklist, finish up everything that you got to do, ship it. So I think they're going to do all their production equipment testing on the floor of the plant. And that's going to be a very slow ramp up.
A slow ramp up. I mean, you look at Model X, it had a number of assembly issues and quality issues. Musk the other day was talking about level 5 autonomy by 2019. He really needs to look at Model 3, getting a clean launch of this car. That's the most important thing for them right now, I think.
No, yeah. But you know what? All the investors will be happy as pigs if one rolls off the line in July. It'll be woohoo!
It's
The
Tesla.
stock will go to 600.
Yeah, right.
It keeps them in the news cycle. It keeps that rolling. Yeah, absolutely.
It's funny, I was talking to one of my sources on Wall Street, and that's what they said, that this is what they're saying on Wall Street now. Don't look at the numbers. Throw logic out the window. Just go buy the stock because it's going to 500. Okay, Mike from San Francisco says, one would have to suspect something dramatic as even the transition, he's talking about the Corvette, as the transition from the C6 to the C7 did not close things for 18 months. He says this is like Lockheed Martin rebuilding their F-35 factory.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, like we were talking about before, they could be doing a number of things. They're talking about the tour. They could be spiffing up the place and making it just look more modern and spectacular for people coming through. But there's definitely something behind it other than just making a better tour for when we want to walk through.
One would think.
I understand that new Corvette's being developed in a shop in Warren, in Milford, where the presidential limousine is dealt with, like uber security in that building. And I've seen Google Earth pictures of that. It's like Building 8 or whatever. But it's part of it is presidential limousine. Nobody goes in there. The other part is C8 Corvette.
No kidding. Ooh, interesting. And speaking of vet, Jay Siegel says, so is there going to be a family of vets? He says, I'd love a down market vet junior. I don't think they'd go down market at all. Go buy a Camaro. That's what Camaro's for.
But in that plant, and speaking to what Seyth was saying about this plant being reconfigured, we think, would they keep a line for C7 in there to keep that, $60,000 Corvette to keep the price
Absolutely.
point down? Why not? Why not continue to build this car out, the rear drive car?
That's the argument that makes the most sense to me, that you're going to have kind of the traditional Corvette carry on and maybe even continue to iterate as the mid-engine comes on. Because there's room above, I think, where Corvette is now. I'm not sure about below where C7 exists.
Well, there's an interesting question, too, and I'm going to speak heresy now, I know, but, any other company might have done more with that brand. And I know it's GM and there's a whole legacy there, but, why not have a Corvette SUV? Everybody else is doing it, and I'm sure there's a market out there for it. Now, of course, there's probably some people who are turning over in their graves or pulling their hair out, but, you do wonder, why can't they be a bit more creative with the brand? They kind of got it hermetically sealed, and you do think that they're maybe leaving some money on the table by thinking about it that way.
Oh, yeah, and they've had these discussions within General Motors. But I can tell you the thinking, at least up to now has been, nope, Corvette's a Chevrolet, and it's always going to be a Chevrolet, and it's just part of the lineup, and it's important to bring people into the showroom. They come in to look at the Vette, and they walk out with a Cruze or something else. But I'm with you, Chester. I mean, I think they're leaving a lot of money on the table. When, you know, if you use Porsche as an example of what could be done, yowza, there's billions being left on the table.
And you probably had a show at one point when the Porsche SUV was first being discussed, and your guest probably said, "A Porsche SUV?
Yeah. Get in the world."
Right.
Yeah.
And it was.
But it must be said, it's the profit driver
Oh, absolutely.
for Porsche these
Right.
days, without any
Right.
question.
Well, and we are in the era of the sub-brand now, and sort of the sub-brand. If Buick gets one,
Yeah,
you know,
that's right.
It seems like that Corvette could definitely stand alone, right?
Well, but also headroom too, because what did you say the McLaren was? The new McLaren is 300 grand.
yeah, there's one below it that's more like 200, 180, something like that.
And the new
but-
Ford GT is in the fours.
400, yeah.
400. So GM's looking at this, you know, a ZL1 or Z06, you know, the top line Corvette right now is about 100 grand, right?
More, I want to say.
110.
110.
Mm-hmm.
Still a big delta between that and a Ford GT or a McLaren.
Yeah, I mean,
so-
the Porsche 911 Turbo is $190,000 these
Right,
days. So there's
right.
a ton of space in the super sports car world to
You bet.
get something above Corvette now. And frankly, GM doesn't have a problem making performance to compete with those cars. So making something that's a bargain proposition versus a Ferrari or a Porsche 911, I think is a cool idea.
Okay, hold those thoughts. We're going to come back to this, but we got to take another break right now because Bridgestone is another company that supports this program. Okay, we're back and going through some of the questions from the audience. We got one here from Richard Setter, who had actually called in, but Richard, it was a little bit too long, so we're going to go with the print version here, as it were. And he asks, I'll throw it out to the panel, can you tell us if the Buick Enclave Avenir will offer a second row option bench seat rather than 2 bucket seats?
Whew. No idea.
Yeah, I have
no idea. I mean,
It's a good thing you asked the automotive experts here.
no clue. It doesn't really seem to fit with the brand as they're proposing it right now to have a bench seat. It's obviously more the high end sort of luxed out version. So I don't know.
JD heard us talking about gasoline prices. He says gasoline is $5.27 a gallon in Ontario, Canada today. That's $1.16 a liter. I had no idea fuel prices were that high in Canada.
Oh, yeah. I actually just moved to Detroit from Calgary, Alberta in January. I spent 4 years there. And yeah, gas is at least 3 times as expensive. And mind you, it's incredibly ironic because Alberta is where the oil sands are, the tar sands that have got such a black name. But Canada is, in fact, the largest exporter of, we import more oil from Canada than from any other country on the planet. A lot of people don't know that either. So it's incredibly ironic that Canada exports the raw material, but doesn't really have enough refineries, particularly in the western part of the country. So a lot of the gasoline is actually re-imported as a refined product. But in any case, yeah, there are huge taxes in Canada right
That's
across
got to
the
be
board.
like $3 a gallon tax, just about.
Yeah, and there's a, you know, it's one thing in Ontario or particularly Toronto where there's a lot of public transport options, but Canada's a big, wide country, and I can tell you, having been living and working in Alberta, people think nothing of driving 3 or even 6 hours to get anywhere, and this is a part of the world where gas prices have a big impact on your spending budget, right? And when you're paying that much more, there's all sorts of carbon taxes as well, and just it's become it's the gift that keeps on giving for the policymakers, but Canadians are paying a pretty stiff price for it, and some of it is policy driven. They want to get people more into electric vehicles, and that's all well and fine in Ontario, which is largely hydropower driven. But the further west you get, the more they depend on other sources, including coal, to generate their electricity. So Canada's got some policy issues to work out, I can tell you that.
Interesting. Let's see. S10 Baja says, will the 2017 Bolt have a shorter model year and align with a fall of 2017 for a 2018 model year? I'm not sure I don't know.
It's been, how long has it been for sale? I mean, it's pretty much a full 17 car, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to say the Bolt went on sale in very, very small numbers in California only this past December.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, beginning of the year.
Yeah,
and
so-
sort of a slower rollout. So it depends on what you want to consider, I guess, a full model year. 18 will be the first full model year of it really having 50 state availability, for sure. But I'm not sure if that answers the specific question.
You know, a lot of, and I'm a little hazy on the details, but a lot of what drove the whole model year thing is what you had to certify for fuel economy and emissions.
Right.
With an electric car, you don't need any of that.
Yeah.
So does the model year become less important? I mean, and when I say certify, I mean you had to pay the EPA like, you know, $100,000 per engine iteration and all that to certify every single year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't think it's going to go away. It's still a way to tell that I've got a newer car than you.
It's a good marketing tool.
You know? Yeah, it's a marketing tool, right.
Well, I was struck. Unless I'm mistaken, I was looking at Toyota's lineup online the other day, and they had some 2018 vehicles, and I'm thinking, that's pretty early for a 2018. I mean, I don't know what the rule of thumb is these days, but I mean, we're just, 5 months into 2017. Is it really possible?
Yeah,
I mean, is that the new normal?
And again, this comes back to the certification for emissions and fuel economy I was talking about. And again, I'm a little bit hazy. I think you can start calling something like the next year model year. So you can start calling things a 2018 as of February or March. And then, so you certify now, you get almost all of 2017, you have all of 2018, and you don't have to recertify again until the 2019 model year. So it's a money-saving thing, and it's a marketing thing. Whoa, I got the 2018, but even though it's not 2018.
Yeah, because I was thinking back in the day, I may be mistaken, but I was thinking that, like, didn't it used to be that Labor Day was kind of considered you'd start to see the next year models come out. I'm dating myself by, this is probably 20 years ago, but
you're right.
But I feel like that was the norm, and all of a sudden, it's to hear that, as soon as March, you can start talking about the next year model. I mean, we've come a long way.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And, again, automakers love to sell the newest, greatest stuff. So even if the car hasn't changed much, but you can say it's the 2018, people will go for it. Okay, this one goes to you, Seyth. Mohammed Al-Dajan, I hope I said that right, or Al-Dayan, said, is McLaren moving too fast introducing new cars? He says, I'll bet 650S prices are plummeting.
I don't know. I think that the residuals are fairly strong. I don't think that they're moving faster than they've intended to. I think that they're following a pretty well-constructed plan that they put together from the very beginning. So my argument would be they're right now selling or have orders for more cars than they can build, or as fast as they can build anyways. So I don't really see the downside there.
Yeah, I doubt the prices of the the 650 are plummeting.
Yeah.
Because to your point, and McLaren knows this well, just like Ferrari and the other supercar guys do, you never meet demand.
Right.
You always build one less than there is demand for, because that keeps the prices up.
The volumes on all these are so low, and when you have something like the 650 and then you bring out the 675 long tail to follow it up, that's another higher performance and more limited edition too. It keeps everything in a really special zone that I think it makes the collectors happy and makes us sort of poor people happy about getting in the cars too.
Okay, last question here. Royal with Cheese wants to know, do you guys think that all the excitement surrounding Fernando Alonso's attempt at the Indy 500 will translate into more IndyCar fans long term?
Oh, man. I don't know. The long-term prospect of any IndyCar fan seems dubious to me, to be completely honest. I don't know, though. It goes back and forth. I get so frustrated with racing because it's amazing when you're there. It's especially for somebody that's into cars. I think it's the technology can be phenomenal and it's really exciting, but the history of it in the U.S. is so marked with failure that it's hard for me to at least to predict a promising future.
Look, I'm a big IndyCar and F1 and all kinds of motor racing fan. I think it's terrific that Alonso is coming to the Indy 500. I think it's really good for him too, because Clearly, McLaren in Formula One this year is a complete and total disaster. Complete and total. And I think him coming here, Alonso coming to the Indy 500 has really increased the buzz. I heard that 2 million people watched his first oval test at Indy on streaming it. I mean, Indy doesn't get any kind of numbers like that.
It's kind of like, I remember as a kid when Jimmy Clark and Graham Hill came to Indy, and it was like, I can't believe it, this is a real big deal.
Yeah.
So I think there's some of that in there.
No, I think there is, but, and I think it will increase a lot of viewership of this year's Indy 500.
Yeah, but
the long term, nah.
Will it increase it? Will the viewers be coming from the U.S. or will they be watching it from elsewhere?
No, elsewhere.
Yeah.
But that's where you get growth. Instead of, who cares if all the regular fans tune in? You got the regular fans. If all kinds of people, especially I think the entire or a good chunk of the Formula One audience is going to tune in to see how's our Fernando doing.
Sure. I mean, I guess my argument would be that long-term growth is better benefited by a bigger American audience getting interested in it. People who aren't hardcore, but who are brought into the fold from the States, especially for the 500.
You're kind of growing the grassroots.
Yeah,
thing.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, look, we're coming up to the top of the hour here. I guess it's time to shut this conversation down, but it's been a really good one. We've been all over the map with all kinds of things. I want to let you guys know and let the audience know, too, this is the 20th anniversary of Autoline.
All right.
So, yeah,
Congratulations.
20 years we've been at this thing. Not with this show. This show started later, but when we first got going here, it was 20. From Motor1.com. I'll throw in the .com, and Chester Dawson from the Wall Street Journal. Good having all three of you guys here.
Great to be here.
Thanks, John. Good to be here.
And want to thank all of you for having tuned in.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, your journey, our passion, and by Lear, a global leader in automotive seating and electrical systems.
Well, we didn't get to GM rebuilding that original Durant building, but
Did you see the photos of it?
yeah,
It looks
terrific.
amazing. It looks
pretty cool.
incredible. Yeah.
Really good.
Beautiful hewn beams and great place.
And they've got the Kettering stuff in there too, with it behind sort of the glass wall. So they have all these archives coming
Yeah,
from Kettering. That
right.
seems like it could be really cool.
And if you had brought that up, I was going to bring, your viewership doesn't know about the GM Museum, which is the unofficial
Heritage.
Heritage Museum. That's the first thing I thought is this Flint thing, is give it the full Monty. Bring all those vehicles up there, create a General Motors museum.
Right.
I don't know if they're going to do that.
Yeah, there was an element of, I don't know if I'd call it hubris or not, but in the press release, because they're talking about sort of reinvesting in the community. And I think when GM is opening its original plant as a reinvestment, which by the way is only open to the public by appointment.
Yeah.
And Buick City is still over there, sort of rusting away. I don't know how short people's memories are in Flint, but
Yeah.
there's an element of something there.
Yeah, well, Buick City's not worth restoring.
That's fair. That's fair. But
this, I'm not even familiar with the building. I've never seen it. I was unaware of it. So I think it's cool that they're doing what they're doing.
I didn't get a sense for how big it is. Did you guys, just overall?
It looks long.
Yeah.
Based on the photo.
I have no idea like square footage wise, but
Was this offices? I thought they said it, even though they call it Plant 1, it was never really an assembly plant, or I didn't get the.
It was the original. I mean, it was the carriage building plant. Like it was Durant's original. Like they
so
built,
they didn't build cars.
Yeah, well, they did. Then when he got together with Buick, like that's where they first started putting the whole thing together. And I think that was still in operation when General Motors was incorporated or whatever. But yeah, they started out building carriages there, and they were leasing it, I guess, from another company in the early going. So they built a couple of cars there 100 years ago.
Because I'll bet the people at the Ford Piquette's plant, which are doing this yeoman's job of trying to restore that whole facility, are going, really? Looking at what GM did for this place in Flint.
Right.
Because they struggle to get money. And
They had to replace something like 600 windows down there.
yeah, right.
Wow.
Each one, puttied and God.
I know.
Well, they're doing Packard now. They are. There's another story in I think Detroit News saying that, and the people who are actually doing the design are in the offices right next to ours. So they're saying that construction is going to start this summer. It's going to start in a month or two, which still blows my mind when you look at that place. Especially the buildings right on the road are in better condition than the buildings like as you go off. So the fact that they're going to put windows and people in those buildings, let alone offices, is crazy to me.
Does there have to be any EPA cleanup at that site?
My understanding when we moved in, they were talking about how they were doing asbestos abatement like for a long time, and that was the one of the big stages that they were at. So I don't know. I actually I've been meaning to. I think it would be a cool story to end up talking to the people, especially if the building owner is in town, to find out like what's going on. And I haven't been through there. I mean, I've been through there when I wasn't supposed to when I was in college, but I haven't been through there in 15, 20 years or something. So it would be.
Are there still people living in the plant?
They've cleared it out. I mean, that whole neighborhood now is like they bought up the owners, the two owners of the plants have like bought up so much of the real estate around there because it's worth nothing, and either knocked down houses or really opened it up, and there's security everywhere now. So yeah, it would be more. You could still do it, but it's more difficult now to just wander into the plant than it was 10 years ago for sure. So
and it's the same owner that of the last time it was quote sold. It's that same owner. It hasn't changed. I think so.
Yeah, because he bought it. I think this guy bought it in 2012.
And he lives somewhere else. Yeah. He lives in some other country.
Yeah, he's Peruvian.
Yeah,
exactly.
And it's the same guy. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. I don't know. Like you kind of ask like, what's the holdup been? I mean, I know there's a lot to do there, obviously, but I think between doing regulatory stuff and like just cleaning up the grounds, preparing the area, doing the, like I said, buying the real estate to sort of like secure it a little bit more. It's still going to be a huge project, but I don't know. It's cool.
Are they going to demolish a big part of that main building, or?
I think that they're going to have to. I haven't heard. They're only talking about construction right now.
Yeah.
But I mean, you look again, like sort of as you look down the line, you'll see like elevator shafts and stuff that are crumbling. You know, whole floors that have fallen in. Not just like a building with no windows and it needs to be quote unquote restored. You would have to rebuild huge sections of it to make the entire thing work.
Yeah.
Plus the square footage is insane.
Gigantic. It's a mile long.
Right, I know. Exactly.
Yeah. It was probably the biggest building of its. It was probably the biggest building in the world when it was completed.
Yeah. I mean, it's phenomenal. Even the other day, like I said, we had some of the Cadillac PR guys, and they hadn't been down there. A few of them were coming in from New York, and they hadn't seen it, and they're like, "This is really Detroit. This thing is big." I'm like, "Yeah, it's the Packard plant. I mean, it is a large outfit."
What I want to know, because I wanted to get my hands on it, there used to be where the bridges that crosses over the street, which is kind of where the main entrance was, or the main office entrance.
Yep.
And above there, as you would drive in, there was this massive stone block that had Packard chiseled into it. And it looked really cool.
Yeah.
And it's gone.
Yeah, they've got it covered. You know how they'll do the sort of plastic sheeting that mimics what's underneath it?
Yeah.
They have that sign now just printed, screen printed onto a fabric or a plastic thing that they're
They put a wrap on the building.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Right.
But I'd like to know who the hell got that.
Well, over the front door there was that there too. So I remember when we worked up on West Grand Boulevard. I drove over there once, and I couldn't believe like the granite lintels that were carved out with Packard Motor Car Company across like the main front door.
Right.
And they were all taken out of there too.
Yeah. But I mean, they weren't like broken out. They were professionally removed. Somebody's got these.
Yeah, exactly right. Take it out, right. And then that space has got to be filled in.
The strippers got it.
Yeah, somebody's got it. I know. Well, that's good news because I gave no hope to that thing ever getting off the ground, the restoration of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and you know, knock wood, like I'm still just reading articles, you know, and I know that they have an office. They're actually working on the building across from ours too. They have a big banner up there. I think that's another like small project. Eventually they might want to move their corporate offices into that. So things are happening over there.
I gotta get up there, yeah.
I remember when we did the 100th anniversary for Automotive Industries, we came across, I can't remember if it was a photograph or like an artist's sketch of the Packard plant.
Right.
And it was completed, I want to say 1917, 1918, maybe before that. and there's nothing but orchards and open
Incredible.
fields around it. I mean, it was a little bit in the country when it was built.
Well, what's the plan? Because I passed it the other day, and I always forget it's there. You're coming up. Oh, geez. It's the big white plant that's just totally crumbling. Was that Dodge, Maine?
No. It's Fisher Body.
Fisher Body. That's
Yeah.
right on the corner as 3 ramps are coming together, and the thing's there.
I
And
want to say it's called Plant 21.
okay, that wasn't Dodge, Maine. That
No,
was Fisher.
Dodge Maine is gone. Dodge Maine was torn down to put up the Cadillac plant in Hamtramck.
Okay, so that's Fisher Body. What's going to happen with that thing? You guys know what we're
Yeah.
talking
No,
about? That-
yeah.
I know the building you're talking about. I wouldn't have known what it
Every
was
time you go
called.
by,
But
you
yeah,
go
I see
like,
it every
"Oh,
day.
God."
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I got to tell you, I was in that plant when it was still operational. And
Wow.
when I was in there, they were doing GMC special body trucks. So it was those trucks where you just have the cab and the frame, and then they build whatever that goes on the back of it. And that's what that plant did there.
Chassis cabs, they call
Chassis
them.
cabs,
Yeah.
exactly right. But yeah, I was in that damn thing when it was still operational.
Wow.
And there was some German guy in the last 3 to 4 years who came in from Berlin because he wanted to buy that thing and turn it into a whole disco restaurant, blah, 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 big thing. But he thought it needed too much work.
Wow.
And so I don't know what's going to...
It's a little too post-apocalyptic.
Oh, it is
Right.
possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ruin
I'm almost
porn.
surprised that there's no obligation. I mean, what, these companies went bankrupt, and that's why? I mean, don't they have, isn't there any clause or something that they just can't leave these things to rot? I mean, there's probably a public safety hazard at some level.
You think so,
too,
versus
right?
just walking away from it.
I think maybe some of that can be answered by the history of the politics of the city of Detroit, though, too, don't you think? I mean,
Well, somebody owns it, and it's no longer General Motors. I mean, General Motors probably sold or walked away from that decades ago. But that's a common problem in Detroit is absentee landlords. You can't get them to pay their taxes. You can't get them to pick up the garbage. You can't get them to mow the lawn in many cases. So
Well, I
it's
understand
a
when
real issue.
residents, but you're talking about, there's got to be some corporate parent, somebody's got to own this, right? And
Yeah.
I mean, you'd think that at the threat of confiscation, and just the eyesore element too. I mean, I guess Detroit hasn't had a ton of money to worry about curb appeal, but you do wonder, as somebody who's new to Detroit and I'm seeing these things, it's kind of like, it's hard to get over that legacy. Even there's a lot of talk about revitalization in the industry's 17 million vehicles, but you're kind of surrounded by this, debris from another age, and it does kind of weigh on your soul at some level.
In a prominent place where like 3, freeway ramps
Right.
are coming down. I mean, it's just right there. Okay, Fisher Body. I
Yeah.
should have known that. Yeah.
And to your point there, though, Chester, it's here's a city that's been worried about can we get the street lights back up?
Yeah. Right.
Can we get the garbage trucks to even pick up the garbage? Can we even get a few more buses here so people can get to their jobs? Can we get the cops some new cars? Can we get some new? So to say now we got to go hire people to chase after these absentee, it's like we'll get to that.
Yeah.
We got other bigger problems to get to first.
Sure.
Yeah.
One of my guys, Steve Ewing, lives in Indian Village, right downtown, and he was amazed this year. This year was, and I can't remember what road, but one of the roads that he has to take to work every day was plowed for the first time since he's lived there. It was the first year that they got it plowed, and it just blew his mind when he got out there. So yeah, what are we gonna do with this giant, 190,000 square foot building is lower on the list of
Yeah,
I
yeah.
would
Right.
imagine.
And those things, like the Packard plant, were built to last. I mean, really last, like the pyramids. If it's an Albert Kahn building, and I think that Packard plant
It
is.
is.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
You need like an atomic bomb to
Right.
take these things down.
Even ours. I mean, it blows. Whenever we have people come visit, and if any of you guys are around, I'd love to have you through. But we do
I'd love to.
the cargo elevator is so cool, partially because it's a cargo elevator, but the other thing is you get to see the floors when you're going up through them, right? It's just a screen, and the floor between my office and the studio below, it's got to be 5 feet of concrete. It's crazy when you think about like how overbuilt it is.
Yeah.
Because they were going to have presses or whatever,
Yeah,
like
right.
giant million-pound machines on these floors doing work, and they had to stand up to it. So it makes me, and then I go to my house and I feel like I can push a wall down with my hands. It's
That's
wild.
cool. I had no idea that your offices are down there.
Yeah, just for the last, we've been in there for about a year, and we got it was just, our office is a big brick box, but we did a build out 6 months ago, 7 months ago now. So it looks a little cool and startup-y now, better than it did before. When it was just like 5 dudes staring at each other.
Yeah.
With one light bulb.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Hey, Chester, how long were you in Japan?
Well,
I remember your byline from Tokyo for years.
yeah, I've had a couple of iterations. So I was there working from '93 to 2003, and then I went back in 2010 till early 2013, and then at that point I was reassigned to Canada. But so there's those 2 periods, and there's about a 10-year gap. So there's kind of the Carlos Ghosn Nissan revival plan era, pre-Akio Toyota, and then there's the more recent the Toyota acceleration scandal. I kind of missed that. I came into the tail end of that, or came back to it. But the whole earthquake tsunami thing, and
Yeah, it was a big one.
all that stuff was part and parcel. But
So how's your conversational Japanese?
it's pretty good. It's not, it's getting rustier the longer I am away. But it's kind of like riding a bike, I think, because I had that interval where I was gone, and I was kind of wondering myself how quickly I'd be able to adapt to getting back and able to use it in a workplace way. But it came back pretty quickly, I'm glad to say. So.
Did you speak before you had gone there?
I studied
in
abroad
school?
in college, so really, including that year, it's almost 15 years altogether. But in these basically three periods, so I guess it's something where I kind of stumbled into journalism, so the Japanese came before that, and then it worked out well. So, but it's.
I love Tokyo. I always tell Tokyo is like my favorite city to visit. I don't know if I could live there because I don't speak Japanese, but every time I'm there, I feel like I'm in a playground of wonder.
And they probably look at you and say, Godzilla.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that.
Although I'd say it's probably one of the few cities where you don't have to have any Japanese and you can get along just fine. I mean, you need some.
Yeah.
Just ask Carlos Ghosn about that. Yeah, but I would say you get so much more out of it if you read the paper and understand the TV, because there is this kind of cutesy Japan, this kind of veneer of
Right.
Oh, I think I understand this country, but the minute you start to hear what people are saying on the elevators and read what's in the scandal sheets, there's this whole other Japan out there just waiting for you to.
Interesting.
Cool.
I remember having this debate with my editors at one. I think it was at Business Week, but it was like, well, what does Toyota think? And it just struck me like, people thought of Toyota as this monolith, and you really didn't see it come out in the open until this big internal wrangling over whether Akio Toyota was really a worthy successor, and should he been offered the CEO-ship of the company, the scion of the Toyota family, and was he really up to the job? And
Just a playboy.
yeah, and you had this Okuda faction coming out and saying, this is getting away from the meritocracy that we've tried to build here, and the idea the family can play politics, because there's a lot of Toyotas at Toyota. They don't all have the Toyota surname, because Kiichiro, let's just say he was a ladies' man, but there is a big chunk of Toyota family people, and there's this interesting dynamic there about what is the Toyota. The Toyota family only owns a few percentage of the company, but they have a larger. It's kind of like Ford, I guess.
Like the Ford family,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
2% of the holdings and 40% of the control.
And just like Ford has different factions and things, I think people miss that with Toyota on its rise to ascendancy, and it was the biggest company on the planet for a while in terms of sales. And and the scandal happened, and they've been kind of they're still a world-class company and definitely up there. But I think there was this period in the U.S., particularly in the U.S. media, I felt it reporting from Japan, where Toyota could do no wrong, and it was this big monolithic Godzilla-like thing. But in fact, being there, I saw the dirty little secrets and the fact that people were at each other's throats internally, and they didn't really have a strategy on many vehicles, and they were worried about overbuilding and all this stuff. So anyway, it was kind of, that's what I think about Japan too. It is a great place to visit, and you can certainly live and operate there without having to know the language. But I just think it adds an additional layer of understanding.
Sure, yeah.
You were probably in many circumstances where the the locals had no idea you spoke the language until
Oh, yeah.
until you're engaged in a conversation.
Yeah.